That's fine.
So thanks for agreeing for this, Lucy. I know this is not something, this is my kind of blog or vlog. It's not something that you probably would normally do. But as I said, like, I'm kind of changing the direction of my blog. It's getting more political and social. I probably should change the name of it, but
yeah, probably.
yeah. But I mean, I still have my website, and that's more themed for beer reviews and stuff. And to be honest, most of the top 9 of the 10 videos I've done is all beer related. So
Oh, there you go. We can talk about beer.
But like, I mean, I see other people, like, there's lots of people that have changed their direction of their channels. I mean, the way I figure it, like, these are the kind of conversations people will be having in a pub anyway. You know, I mean, did you see that documentary last night? Man, did you see that? I mean, that's the reality.
Yes.
So hello everyone. Well, today I have the great pleasure to be joined by Lucy Witts, who co-wrote and directed the excellent 2017 documentary Dragan's Lair. It was a very brave and personal account of the sexual and emotional abuse that Lucy suffered at the hands of her stepdad, Dragan. In the documentary, we get to see Lucy courageously meet Dragan after 30 years of not seeing him. We hear her daughter confront her father about the abuse he inflicted on her, his strange rationale behind it, and what's more, how this affected Lucy's relationship, not just with her stepdad, but also with her mother and her sister, who was also abused by Dragan as well. It also delves into the issues of grooming and predation. But it must be said that the movie is a story of an abuse survivor and not a victim. And I think that's a key distinction, and it's important to say, I think, Lucy. I mean, that's what I got from looking at it. So, Lucy, many thanks for joining me today. I also have something to add. Before we start, I think it might be a good idea that for people who have started watching this video, perhaps it might be a good idea to pause and maybe look at your documentary first before they look at this video, because this is like a reaction interview to the documentary, and I think the reactions to the documentary might be slightly different if they look at this first before looking at the documentary. It might just kill some of the effect and raw emotion that I think you're looking for from the viewer, if that makes sense. So please look at the documentary first if you can, because I think your opinions might change. You know, if you looked at this, if you look at this before you looked at the documentary, if that makes sense. Anyway, okay. So it was an incredible story, and your interviews with Dragan were astonishingly revealing. It was a very brave thing to confront your father, your abuser, opening up about something so private in a very public manner. What made you find the strength to do this, to meet your abuser face to face, to bare your soul, not just to your father, but to the whole world, essentially?
Well, there are many things within that question. So, firstly, hi, and thank you for having me. So, when I was 19, I was told that Dragan was dead. So for me, I never really, from that moment on, the possibility or opportunity of ever having any conversations with him was out the door at that point. So I never really had the opportunity to think about it again until somebody contacted me to let me know that you will never believe this, Lucy, but I've just seen this in the newspaper. You know, Dragan's just been arrested for molesting 3 girls under the age of 10. So obviously I then started, you know, looking into it and finding out what was going on. And in the couple of months during that time of working out where he was and what was going on, and, you know, how was he alive, and just sort of getting over that shock to begin with, basically it gave me the opportunity, and I am a filmmaker. I mean, you know, that must be said to start off with. So as a filmmaker, you automatically thinking about stories and how to communicate your stories, you know, in general. But I started thinking about the journey that the girls are going to have to now go through, that he's just abused. And it wasn't a question to me as to whether he had or whether he hadn't. I knew he had. It was obvious to me that absolutely he had. And for the girls to have come forward in the first place was quite a profound thing. And then it started making me think about my journey, which I haven't really spent time sort of dwelling on for quite a long time, for a number of years, obviously, because I'd put it to bed. I had a lot of therapy, but that was working on myself, and that was working on my here and now. But what that did to me, finding out that he'd been arrested, was I started thinking about the other girls, what they were about to go through. And I just thought, and then with that, it sort of reminded me of my journey and what a journey it's actually been. And, I don't get to be 46 today and be where I am without a whole lot of work. It's important to be said. I mean, it's not like I just shut off all emotion and, I've actually done the work. I've gone there. I've gone to those dark places and explored it. But sort of realizing that when my truth came out when I was 12, that I was fortunate in that I was believed, but the reaction of people towards me, in that moment, in the almost immediate moments thereafter, within hours and days, and then in the short term, long term, if that makes sense, my early teenage years, the months that followed and the next couple of years. And in that time, which was probably from about 12 to 14, in that time was the time when my impression of my experience was being stamped, if I can put it that way, because that was the first time that I started getting feedback from the outside world. And that feedback that you get from the outside world tells you what the perception is of how you should feel about what's happened to you. Mm-hmm. And I realized there was such a big disconnect for me in that time, considering I was so young when it started, and it was the only reality and conscious reality I knew. I mean, I was a toddler when it started, literally. That it was such a shock to try and put all these perspectives and perceptions into place of how I should be feeling, how I should have felt, and then obviously all the very normal feelings and emotions came out, the disgust and the anger and the shame and more shame and more shame, and the hurt and the pain and all those things, all those experiences, obviously, and they came out for years after that. But that first moment, that first week, I just, if it could have been dealt with differently, I wonder today how much different my experience would have been. And I just felt it's something we don't talk about. We need people to take the emotion out of it, as emotional as it is, and it is possible to do that, but take the emotion out of the conversation and just talk about it, and talk about it rationally.
So you're talking about that. That actual separation between you and your father, it was very abrupt. And 1 minute you were loving your father, and next minute he was gone.
And only he was gone, but he was hateful.
Okay.
So keeping in mind, I mean, if you can break it down as to literally how it happened. Yes, hateful things happened. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm not taking away from that. Yes, it was gross. Yes, it was disgusting. Yes, all those things. Okay. But for it to get to that, there had to be a lot of loving. Mm. And to do that, he had to get really close to me emotionally. He had to establish that relationship with me to such an extent that it would be so tight that I wouldn't ever say a word to anyone. And not out of fear, but out of choice. And because that's normal and that's the reality. The minute it starts becoming that it's an abuse in the context of there's no love behind it, and it's a hateful thing that he's doing at the time, okay, the more likelihood there is that I'm going to speak to somebody about it, a friend or a parent, the other parent or a teacher or whatever. Also, you've got to keep in mind that it was at a time when there was no public knowledge of these things. It wasn't something that was discussed ever, like ever, you know. So yeah, so it was actually all about that. It was just.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and of course you were. This all came out while you were 12, 13, 14. I mean, you're going through your teenage years as well, on top of everything else. So,
Absolutely.
I can imagine. So forgiveness is a major theme in your documentary, the strength to forgive, even though you suffered greatly physically and, as you said, mentally. Can you tell us something about the power of forgiveness?
The one thing that I learned about forgiveness, and I learned it the hard way, is that resentment only hurts yourself. And you have one life, and it's this one. And every year that goes past, where you're carrying self-hate, where you're carrying shame, where you're carrying, confusion and mistrust and anger and bitterness and all these things, all of that, every minute that you take on that emotion is a moment that you're taking away from your own living. And it was a real conscious choice, and it wasn't an easy choice, because I had to fight all my natural instincts, and I had to, for a very long time, for years, and only as an adult, and only after a lot of therapy, I had to consciously sit there and go, okay, so I'm feeling really angry right now, okay, and I'm going to go and take cocaine, whatever it was. I mean, there was a lot of stuff. It was all the addictions you could imagine. I got to a point where I could say to myself, how is that going to affect him? That's not affecting him. He's dead. It doesn't affect him. Keep in mind that, I'd been told he was dead. But not only that, but even if he wasn't dead, that's not affecting him. That's me. That's my life that's stopping and pausing and on pause. And why would I want to allow him and give him that much more power over me and over my life than to donate all those years of thinking about him and hating him and being resentful after I'd done it, of course. But I now have the rest of my life to think about. And I just thought, absolutely not. And then when you start realizing that, and when you start getting to that point where you're able to go, the only way that I can stop hating and stop resenting and stop being angry is by forgiving. And what forgiving means is giving it up. It's giving up the energy and thought of allowing them the anger and bitterness and hatred.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cul-de-sac anyway. I mean, hate is just going one direction, whereas maybe like you're challenging your energy into making a documentary, and it's more creative, and you're trying to figure out why people do these things, and it's what you're doing is more productive and helpful in a way,
to a certain extent, when you stop to listen and read the YouTube comments that give me, I mean, it's very mixed what people say, and that I think in itself is great, because it means that people are talking.
Exactly.
And even if they're shouting at, accusing me of being a pedophile, which I find quite interesting.
Yes.
Even if they, want to project their anger at me, that's okay. At least you can talk.
Yeah.
At least in shouting, well, my experience wasn't like that. Oh, okay, so you also had an experience.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about that,
Exactly. I mean, it's better to get things out anyway, and
yes.
It's better to get it out in the open. And just with the interview then, with your father, how did you set it up? I mean, how did you convince your father to agree to it? I mean, to admit what he'd done on screen?
Well, you know what? There's three elements to that. The first is as much as I believe that it's light in daytime, he believes that he didn't do anything wrong. And that in itself is a very, very difficult concept to grasp. Okay. And it's difficult for anybody who doesn't experience that to grasp. And I mean, it was difficult for me to grasp. I've had to really sit and think about that. Yeah. But it's really very, it's selfishness to the optimal extent that I've realized or decided. That's what it is, to believe that you have no impact on someone's life when you take that away from them. So that was the first thing. So he genuinely didn't believe that he was guilty. He wasn't denying that he did things, but he didn't believe in his mental space that was a bad thing, number one. Number two, he had been arrested for doing this to 3 girls. So me arriving at court, which was the day before I did the interview, and literally what was happening, it was his first hearing, and he had to be in court. Now, I hadn't seen him, and I arrived in the courtroom, and I sat directly behind him with my mother, my mother's sister, and my mother's brother, and we literally sat direct, and he turned around, and he saw us, and that was his worst case scenario. Right there. Because he had pleaded not guilty to molesting these 3 girls, and I was his absolute worst case scenario in his innocence, in his pleading of innocence. So I think when I asked him and also, I mean, consider the shock for him too in seeing me and my mother 30 years later, and my mother's entourage, so to speak. I mean, he must have been in absolute shock, and he's an old, frail man. I mean, he's not like, he's got dodgy feet and goodness knows what else. I mean, it's not like he's some young spring chicken looking in his prime. Let's be honest. So I think it was a shock for him, like a shock. Also, the shame for him of the fact that we arriving in the courtroom where he has now been sort of caught, so to speak. And then I went outside, and he came outside for a cigarette, and I said to him, would you meet me for a cup of coffee straight after the court proceedings? So I said, so he said, fine. Obviously, he had to know what I wanted to say, because it could have gone either way for him. And I then met him at a coffee shop, and I said to him, look, I feel that there's only one way that we can turn this awful experience that happened between you and I into a good experience, and that is to use our experience to educate other people, and educate other people on multiple levels. I said to him, it's his opportunity to explain to parents and of other children, what it is that you as a pedophile are looking for and at, and how and what, so that it gives them an insight into how to protect themselves and their children, because it's not something that only happens to the grooming of the parents too, but it also gives me an opportunity to ask you all the questions that I really want to know. So he agreed to it, and then because he agreed to it, and I thought, you silly bugger, like how stupid can you be? I mean, you're on trial here, and surely you know and understand that I will use it against you. I thought, well, let me nip it in the bud. Let me sort of cinch it right here, and so I said, okay, well, how about tomorrow? So the next day, that night, I gathered a crew together in Swakopmund, and it's this tiny little beach town, really in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the desert. And it was important to me that it was external. It had to be an exterior shoot, because I didn't want it to be in the covers of a room. Part of it for me is about the fact that it's open. Like sort of the subliminal messaging, if I can put it that way. So it had to be outside. It's a beach town, so it's misty in the morning, and wet and cold, and then suddenly it's sunny, and then it's all, and that would have messed with me as a filmmaker. So I needed something that's going to be relatively constant. So just going beyond the mist belt was relevant for me. And then the third thing was, how far can you go? How far does your curfew, what's the word? I don't know. Your bail or whatever, allow you to go. So we literally, I said to my friend who was going to play cameraman, who's not a cameraman, play cameraman, and I said, okay, I want you to drive the car as far as that and then turn right. And that's it. And that's literally what we did. We went out on the highway when we could, as far as we were able to go for his curfew, and then we just turned off the road, and that was where we did it.
Okay.
And then the very first thing I said to him, which I filmed, but obviously I didn't put it in the film, is I need you to know that everything you say I will use as evidence against you.
Okay.
Let's not be in any doubt about that. This is not about me standing with you. I will stand with the girls. I will absolutely bear witness against you. And also, we're going to do this documentary. So let's go.
Well, I mean, with such short notice, it came out very well then, Well,
I did it twice.
Okay.
I did it the first time and realized that my sound recording was a few frames out from my camera setting, because I wasn't working with, obviously they were professional crew, but they weren't experienced and, hugely professional. So it was, I had to go back and do some more. Also, in between my first and second interview, I consulted with the professor, Marcel Lont, and she had looked at all the raw footage. Now, you must remember that I've got 8 hours worth of footage and the film's only 45, or 40. So, there's a lot in there that's not in the film. And she wanted to have more information about certain things, because obviously I wanted it to be used for academic reasons as well, and used in the university and stuff, so that they could review it, because, yeah.
Okay. Just with I can't believe that, when you said that he actually thinks what he did was okay. I wonder, do they really think that? I mean, I wonder, is that just them trying to reassure themselves that they're not, that they're not, it's not bad, or
What they do is they know it's not okay in the context of society. They know that. Why do they know that? Because we are told when we are tiny things that there's, psychopaths and pedophiles. It's the worst thing you can be. Okay. You could be into bestiality before you could be a pedophile. Okay. In terms of society. So people, that's one of my missions actually, is to try to break that. And it's not because I think pedophiles are okay on any level. I don't. But I do believe that we need to find a way of being supportive for the people who don't offend. And what happens is that they have the sexual urge, okay, in the same way that 80 years ago, homosexual urges would have been frowned upon. Okay, they have the sexual urge, and I'm not equating them. I'm not drawing a parallel. I'm just drawing a parallel in societal belief. So they have the sexual urge that they don't understand, because it starts really young. It's not something that starts in adulthood. This sexual thing, this fetish, whatever you want to call it, starts really young, and they don't understand it. Okay, some of them will explore it, some won't. Okay, and then it starts becoming deviant, right? Because what then happens, the difference with something like homosexuality is you have two adult people or two conscious people who are consenting in that relationship. But what happens with a pedophile, and particularly a pedophile who has an attraction to really young kids, I mean, I'm talking, in my case, it was 2. So, small children one of the things he said to me is the perfect age is they just need to be able to talk. Okay. So to have that sexual urge for a person of that age, how do they consent? And you only have to have parented a child to 2, 3, 4 years old to understand what I mean here is that they don't know what they are consenting to, right? They will go with whatever you put in front of them, and whatever you, as the parent and as the caregiver, tell them is okay and safe and right. So the child's reaction to what the parent, in this case, because we're talking about familial pedophilia here, the child's reaction to that stimulus from that parent, okay, is the same reaction that a child would give if a parent is trying to teach them to eat with a knife and fork, and then one day they do. You know, that sense of, I'm doing what you want me to do. It's not natural to eat with a knife and fork. It's natural to eat with your hands, right? So, I mean, in terms of us as creatures. So we teach our children how we want them to behave, and it's the same with the pedophile. Okay, the pedophile teaches the child how they want them to respond. When that child responds, which is, most people will call that discipline or obedience, the pedophile interprets that as consent. Two different things. Okay. So, and they believe it to be consent. It can't be consent, and that's the argument, and that's the point. Okay, is that it's not, from the child's perspective, it is obedience.
Yeah. Okay.
Make sense? Do you understand?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Just like getting back to the start of the documentary, were you worried that by meeting Dragan again after so many years that it might trigger something deep inside you again, that it would bring back dark memories, and you know, you might have to.
It did, and I knew it would. It didn't, but I also knew who I was by then, because I was already old. No, I'm not old, but I was already older, and I'd already had enough time to sort of start to get the perspective of who am I and who is he. That was number one. I knew that he would try and get under my skin, and I knew that and I knew that some parts of me, and I didn't know which parts of me, but I knew that some parts of me would respond to that. That was the one thing. The other thing was, the last time I saw him, I was 12, and he was 35, 36. So the very next time I saw him, he was 60 something, and he didn't look the same. He wasn't even the same height. He was an old, stooped man in a very vulnerable position in court, being accused. So he wasn't the big monster, scary person who I had made him out to be. If he had appeared in front of me looking identical to how he did as a child, I think I would have been a bit more rattled by that, but he didn't. He looked... In fact, there are times in the desert where I sat there looking at him and looking for him, if I could put it that way.
Yeah.
What could I see that I could recognize? Because there was very little, that of the person who I knew in the old man who was sitting in front of me.
What do you think he was seeing of you?
He said to me, we had that conversation. He told me that I'm not his type anymore, and then I laugh, actually, because it's laughable. It's not because I'm thinking it's funny, as some people like to think, like, how can she laugh? It's not funny. It's not that I think it's funny, but it's because it's laughable. Come on.
Well, it's absurd, yeah.
Exactly. It's just, he told me that I'm too, my boobs are too big, I'm too old, and I'm fat. I'm not his type.
You actually said this. Wow.
Oh, he said a lot of terrible things. He was comparing a little pebble on the stone to my clitoris. He said a lot of crazy stuff. He was. Okay. There were times when he was offensive because he wanted to be offensive, but I didn't think that everyone needed to hear all of that in the film.
So how did you react when he was saying things like that? Did you just like let him ramble and then come back to him, or did you just tell him to cut it out?
I just ignored it. It was, I knew what he was doing. Okay, firstly, I was there as a film producer and as a film director getting a film. Firstly, secondly, that abused child as much as she's still inside me, she's very protected.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a strong woman and I take care of her. Okay. And it was the strong woman he was dealing with. It wasn't the abused child.
Okay. Yeah.
And also I was there as a film producer and as a film director. So it wasn't as if when he was being like that, I didn't take it as if he was talking to me. I took it as if he was trying to get under my skin because he had everything to lose.
Yeah, yeah. Looking back in the documentary, are you happy with how it all played out?
No, I mean, yes, I am, because I'm happy that I did it, and I'm happy it's there, and I'm happy I got what I got, and it's out there. I think that there's a lot I would have done differently, and there's a lot in the storytelling that I would have done differently. But I didn't really have. Firstly, I had absolutely zero money. Secondly, I was doing it around a working job. I was living in another country at the time. And even though I put out pleas for support and funding, I got none. So, well, I got 19,000 Rand, which is probably the equivalent of about £150, if that, maybe £200. So it wasn't enough to even pay for, equipment, or there was nothing. And I was asking people to do. So it took a number of years to get it completed because, I had to beg, borrow, and steal. And with that, you have to give up a lot of your own sort of vision, because you have to allow people to do what they need to do as well.
Well, you should be very proud of what you got. I mean, if it was such a labor of love, really, I mean, it came out pretty good, I think. And it's beautifully shot, really. I mean, in the desert, two of you sitting on the mattress on the desert. I mean, that's a great scene. What was the immediate reaction from your friends and your family, and even Dragan? Did he? I imagine he saw it.
I sent it to him. I also sent it to his wife because during the course of making it, she actually gave birth to a baby.
Okay.
And she was in her early 20s, his wife. So, I sent it to them all. And I sound like I'm a vindictive person. It's not that. It's just that if somebody had done that for me, life might have been a bit different, I sent it to him, but whether or not he actually watched it, I don't know. Because once I had done the documentary, once I'd done my interviews, I had no reason to ever speak to him again or have any contact with him, because he's not my friend. He's nobody to me, And again, it comes back to that thing of why would I want to give him more of myself and my time and my energy, and I don't. And the film was never about any of that. The film was about having the story out there. How did people react? I have found quite an interesting mix. Okay, firstly, people are not going to come up to you and go, "Oh, it's shit." Nobody's going to do that. I've found a lot of people that know me, don't want to watch it because they don't want their opinion of me changed. Which I find quite interesting. I don't understand that. Also, I think people expect it to be a dramatic, emotional, whatever piece, which I worked hard to not make it that. Mm-hmm. There's one piece of sort of shocker, but I put that in there for a very, very specific and particular reason. But besides that, it's not a how-to manual for pedophiles. It's not for people to watch and go, "Oh, well, this is how you do it." No. It's also not supposed to be self-indulgent, but in the sense of it's not about me and my sister and my mum. It's not about us. It's about the situation, the scenario, the common scenario that you find in all walks of life across every single country in this earth, So
Yeah, we will touch on some of the comments that were left in your YouTube video later, if that's okay. I mean, as you said, no one will say. I mean, but there was a few harsh comments, but I think when you did reply to some of them, their tone immediately softened. I mean, it's that.
I don't think they expect. Okay, firstly, it's been a very YouTube in itself has been a whole nother. That's been a learning in itself.
Yeah.
That experience of putting it up. When I made it, one thing which I said from day one, because I had no money to make it, I never wanted to make money out of it. It wasn't about money. I've never wanted to. So it was made to be free to air always. It's made to be seen. Okay. And that's why, to a certain extent, the bath scene is a regret for me, simply because people can't see beyond it, and it's very early in the film, and it shocks people to not watch it, because they kind of think, oh, it's going to be another one of those. So that's why it's a regret. I know that sounds like a strange thing to say, but that's, if anything, it should have probably maybe come right at the end of the edit. But I don't know. It's just people's response. Firstly, my harshest critics on how I feel and whatever are people who've been abused themselves.
Yeah.
Now, it's really difficult to have multiple people continuously telling you what you are feeling is wrong. So I go out there and I go, oh, I love this cup. This is a beautiful cup. It's my favorite cup and I love it. You say to me, it's ugly. Okay. That doesn't hurt my feelings, right? Why? Because we're talking about this cup. But I go out there and I say, I love this aspect of my personality. And someone goes, how can you love that? Because actually it's bad. You're bad. That's how it feels when people sort of say to you, how can you say that you feel like that? Because I experienced it too, and I feel like this. I mean, just saying it out loud, you can realize how stupid that is. But it still hurts.
Yeah.
You forget that people commenting are projecting and commenting often out of their own fear,
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, and with YouTube, people can be flippant. They're hiding behind the screen and whatever, and they would have a very different conversation if they were face to face with you, I think. We'll touch a little bit on that later because it is important. Just what is the latest on the case? I mean,
he's in prison and he's been sentenced to 96 years or something, and he's going to serve 32 years because there's the 3 cases and they'll run concurrently. But he got 30 something years for each case. He's not got any possibility of parole. He's quite a sickly man, so the chances of him ever walking free are extreme. Yeah.
So how do you feel about him now? I mean, he's still he's
about him now.
Yes, it's good.
How do I feel about him? I feel I'm very mixed emotions. So how do I feel about what he did to me? I feel indifferent. Why? Because it happened, it's healed, I've moved on. It's not part of my today. I could have it part of my today if I chose to, but I choose not to. How does what he did to all the other girls make me feel? Blisteringly angry. That's the thing that keeps me awake at night. How do I feel about pedophilia and pedophiles in general? I feel desperately sorry for them until they actually start perpetrating. I feel sorry for them because I think, what a hell of a burden to have to live with that kind of desire that A, you can't talk about, B, you can't do anything about. Okay, and it's not only pedophilia. There's a lot of, desires that I feel shame that you have to walk through your life experiencing that feeling. The minute you turn around and abuse a child, I no longer feel sorry for you. I feel that you deserve to go to jail. Because you are a criminal. You've taken your desire into a criminal place. I sometimes sit here and I think about, poking my husband's eye out because he's made me cross. Does that mean I'm going to go and do it? Absolutely not. I'm just in a blinding rage in this very moment. Okay. And would I really ever poke someone's eye out? Of course I wouldn't poke someone's eye out. I mean, for God's sake, seriously. But they take it to that level. And then it's not forgivable. Then it's like, no, now you need to go to jail. Thank you very much. I hope that in jail you're going to get a lot of therapy and you will get some work to help you deal with the things that you go through. But you don't belong in society. And I know that what you've got is not curable. Can it be prevented as in the context of people not acting on it if they feel it? 100%, of course, it can be prevented in the context of, not every person who is into bestiality is going to go and mess with an animal. Not every person who's into necrophilia is going to go and find dead people to have sex with. You know what I mean? You don't have to act on these things, but you need to have outlets to talk about it, and you need to have people who are willing to listen and people who are willing to allow you to talk about it. And there have to be safe places for that to happen. Why? Because to prevent the actual manifestation of it,
But the argument might be that could be normalizing it. Is it not better just to keep it as far down the back of the mind?
Okay, well, let me put it to you like this. World statistics here. Okay, 1 in every 5 girls before the age of 18 on this planet will have had unwanted sexual attention before the age of 16. Okay, 1 in every 5 girls. 1 in every 7 boys on this planet will have had unwanted sexual attention before the age of 16. Right? Who are those people doing it? You take that statistic, there are 9 billion people or whatever it is on this planet, okay? At least 1 billion of them are doing it. The perpetrators, right? Where are they living? They're living amongst us. You take 10 people who are your friends, men and women. Out of those 10, how many of them, A, have experienced it? And if those number have experienced it, how many are doing it? You just don't know about it. So don't talk to me about normalizing.
Yeah.
There's a difference between normalizing and making it okay to talk about so that we can protect, so we can turn it around.
Okay.
So that there is an outlet, so that we don't have to have those statistics. Imagine we could turn those statistics into 1 in every, let's double it, let's just be a real devil. 1 in every 10 girls on this planet and 1 in every 14 or 15 boys on this planet. Okay, that's still friggin' horrific, isn't it? Think about it. That's 10% of people who are doing it.
Yeah. I was thinking that maybe the argument to that is that not because of that it's, you see this sexualization of the youth in media and music, etc. That could be a factor why it's increasing.
It's not increasing. It's been around since the beginning of time.
Yeah. Okay.
But think about it, because that's what people say.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying is what society, what I get and what people say. And that's why I feel as strongly as I do about it.
But do you not think it's increasing, though? I mean, it seems...
No, we as a population are increasing, and you're getting to hear about it.
Okay.
Because it's becoming more mainstream media. Okay. And people, you're being taught to talk about it if you're abused. You think about the child who goes to school, okay? They have sex education at school now. Did you have sex education when you were at school?
No, I don't.
Okay,
Not really.
so your children you've got youngish children, I'm guessing, right? They'll start sex education on some level from the age of 6.
Mm.
Okay, from the age of 6, they are taught my body's my body, my body is nobody's body but mine. Yes feelings, no feelings. Kids are taught this. We weren't taught it. Okay, number one. Who's telling them if you have feelings like this, these are the kind of places you go to? They're telling them, oh, if you feel like having drugs, speak to Narcotics Anonymous. They're telling them, oh, if you're having murderous thoughts, speak to a psychologist. But who's telling them about if you're having sexual feelings that are inappropriate, speak to these people? Who's telling them that? But we're all talking about how to protect ourselves from abuse, but yet the abuse is still happening.
Yeah, so they kind of have, as you said, they've no outlet for their emotions then. Okay, let me get back on track. There was a part of your documentary, from the documentary you mentioned that it mattered if Dragan really loved you, or was it just about sex? Why did it matter if he said he loved you?
Because to me, he was my father.
Okay.
So what I wanted to understand, and the purpose of that question for me was, I had already, so as a child growing up, you have two people who are important to you, your mother and your father. He wasn't my biological father, he was my stepfather. But for all intents and purposes, he was my dad, okay? Those are the people who are most important to you. That's where you learn your perspective of what is love. What is love? Love is what happened in the way in which my parents handled me and treated me and guided me and nurtured me through my life. Right. Then you find out, then you sort of, for me, I couldn't separate until well into my 30s. I could not separate love and sex. They would, what do you mean you don't want to have sex with me? Here you are as my friend telling me you love me, but you don't want to have sex with me. But that's a disconnect, okay? So no, that does not make me a sex addict. That makes me unable to differentiate between those two things. And that was a massive thing for me to learn, okay, the difference. Not as a parent, but in terms of my relationships, okay? That was one thing. The other thing is, you've just sat there listening to a man who is your dad telling you he knew that this woman who he's about to pursue, to have a relationship with, has got a 2-year-old daughter who he has seen and he would quite fancy having sex with. Okay? So to be able to get to that 2-year-old daughter, or at the time I was 18 months, but to get to that child, unfortunately, because that's the way it is. I'm not saying what he's thinking is right. This is just how it works. For me to get to that, I have to go through the mother. So he starts having a relationship with my mother. Now, when he started having sex with me, and it wasn't obviously penetrative sex from day one, obviously, okay, but it was certainly a lot of sexual activity, and it was penetrative sex from a very early age. But at what point was it always about sex? Or was there a time when he actually loved me as his daughter? You know, and that is important. That's very important. It's important to know when you come out of a relationship like that, because it is a relationship. Any interaction between two humans is a relationship. Okay, I'm not talking about a romance. I'm talking about a relationship. It is very important for every survivor, as well as abuser, to understand where's that boundary between love and sex. Because there are so many survivors out there today who are doing what I did and having sex with any person, man or woman who walks, because they're looking for love.
Yeah. So, well, that was one of the most shocking things that I found, that when he was explaining that he seen you and he got to you through the mother. I mean, that was really. I mean, I know that's the standard thing that a lot of pedophiles do this, that they get to the children through the mother. But just to hear someone speak that on camera, it was really, really shocking. And so do you think there was love there then?
Yeah, I do. I think that there was love in the same way that, okay, firstly, to him, as weird as it is, and even now it creeps me out, but to him, I was his affair. In fact, ironically, my mother's called me the affair before, back in the day when she was still hurting. And also my sister, but that was, I mean, I'm talking years ago. But that's what I was to him. He says he was grooming me to one day be his wife. Bullshit, because his sexual attraction was to the children. Okay, I mean, that was, so obviously that's rubbish, obviously. Okay. He was trying to groom me and get under my skin. Also, he was trying to butter me up because he wanted me to go in and defend him in court. I'm not stupid. It's just that, but I had to allow him to go through those conversations and discussions in order to get to where I needed to get to. So did he love my mother? Absolutely, he loved my mother.
Okay.
You don't spend 10 years in a relationship with someone and not love them. Did he love her as his soulmate, love of his life, heart's desire? Probably not.
Yeah.
Did he love me like that? I have no idea, because he has such a warped sense of that I wouldn't. I've never experienced that myself, so I wouldn't be able to answer to that. But there certainly was love, but what kind of love? What perspective of love? Don't know.
It certainly expands the parameters of what love is. Yeah, well, in a crazy sense, Jesus. Yeah, I mean, I had a question: was it fatherly love? But I mean, then in his eyes, it was, I guess,
Absolutely, and of course there was. He was the one who'd come and watch me in sports games, and he'd fetch me from school, and he'd pack my lunchbox, and he was dad. And you love your kids, and you love. So he loved me, but he was also sexually aroused by me. Two different things.
Like I have two young kids myself, and a boy and a girl. And before I had my girl, I didn't. Like, people said it's different when you have a girl, and I didn't. How could it be different? A kid is a kid. You love all your kids, but it is truly different because. You kind of feel more protective when you have a baby girl. I know, like it's you feel it's a big bad world out there, and you kind of you expect your boy to grow up big and strong. I know it's cheesy, but you kind of feel, okay, this is my little girl, I have to protect her, So I just
all I can say to that is the strongest people I've met in my life have been girls.
Yes.
And some of the most sensitive and gentlest souls I've met in my life have been men. So that is unfortunate. It's an unfortunate stereotype.
I know.
Because let me tell you, your boy needs your love as much,
of course,
protection, probably more.
Yeah, but I wonder, is that a natural thing, though? I mean,
of course it is.
Yeah, I mean, is that something that goes back to the caveman thing?
Yeah, exactly.
But having said that, like, it's true. My little girl is really strong. Nearly as strong as the lads. So, my next question was, then I didn't get any sense of sorry or feeling for what he had done to you. But then you're not going to get that, really, are you?
Oh no, and I wasn't. To be honest, I really wasn't expecting it. You must remember I had done my research before I actually spoke to him, just in the context of I didn't go there with the intention of making the film necessarily. It wasn't that, but I'd certainly done my research in the context of my experience, and also, you know, trying to understand my experience and where it had come from and why he'd done what he'd done. You know, why was he sorry? No, he wasn't sorry. Absolutely no, he wasn't sorry. Was he remorseful? He was very remorseful. There's a difference.
Okay.
He was not sorry because, as far as he was concerned, it was a consensual act between two human beings. Okay, because his perspective of what consent means is warped. Okay. Did he have sorrow about it in the context of remorse? His remorse was in hearing and discovering just how much he damaged our lives. He couldn't have a perspective, and that all happened off camera. I mean, I had that conversation. I mean, as I said, you know, I've got 8 hours of footage. You know, there was a lot that we covered, but my co-director towards the end, when I had to do my part and my interview, I realized I needed someone to assist me in the film at that point. By then, I'd already done all my other bits and pieces, but I needed someone to help me film me, because I couldn't do that on my own. I already knew who I wanted to interview and me and all of that. And he was obviously, I respect him immensely, which is why I asked him to help me with it. But he wanted it to be no more than between 20 and 30 minutes. And I wanted it to be 90 minutes. But eventually we agreed on half. So that's why there was a lot cut out and a lot that was left out, okay? But he had never really stopped to think about the impact that it would have on our family. Not in the context of how did I feel, the pain I had to go through in my life to get to where I managed to get to. Not in that context. None of that was relevant. But in the context of my sister leaving, and only now I'm able, you know, now that I'm living here and she's living here too, and we're both in the UK now, we have the opportunity to have a relationship. You know, it's scarred my mother and my relationship forever. You know, Mum lives with me. She's downstairs as we speak. You know, it changed the trajectory of our lives, that experience. Not only that, but it also changed my extended family in a lot of ways, and it divided my family. You know, it was a very difficult thing to process for people in 1986. You know, it was not something that was known about. There was nothing. I mean, we didn't in Namibia and in South Africa, we didn't even have television at that point. Okay. You know, so it was like, it was unknown. There was no internet, nothing like that. So that trajectory of how it impacted on our lives, he was remorseful of.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously because he'd been part of our family, you know, and he destroyed our family. So that, and I don't think that there's ever really, I don't think they stop to think about that.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Well, speaking about your mother, I mean, you've seen it yourself in the comments section, and it is a common thing. I mean, how could your mother not know? That's a regular question.
Well, various things. As I've touched on, we are talking about the late 19, from 19. It started in 1976 and it ended in 1988. That was a different time, you know. It was a different era. Also, my mum's she was born in the 40s. You know, she grew up in a different world. She grew up in a world where it was all still very secret. She didn't know, you know, they didn't discuss those kinds of things. It was never something that you thought about, or, you know, she wasn't exposed to it, number one. Number two, she is by nature a very gullible, naive human to this day. Okay, Mum lives in a bubble and always has, always will, and she's not unique in that. And that's one of the reasons why she was targeted. because she was groomable, she was malleable. He knew that he could get past her, and he knew that he could manipulate her into condoning the relationship of whatever the level of the relationship was going to be, even though she didn't know where it went, so he would encourage her to take on evening work. He was, he portrayed himself. She was a young single mother in the early 70s, difficult time. They didn't have the same support systems that they had now. And, he would say to her, I'll bath the kid, you make the supper, or I'll go and put Lucy to bed, you go and while you're doing, put your feet up, or you go and have a bath, I'll get Lucy to bed, or, whatever it is. I mean, she was gullible. Okay. She was truly gullible.
So how does she feel about that then, knowing what happened? How does she feel now?
She just can't talk about it. She also comes from a family. She was raised in England. She comes from a very conservative, closed. You don't discuss it, and she feels shame. She's never had any therapy or any help of her own. Which in itself is, I think, because she's the fear of opening the box. You never know what's going to come out. And I've learned to respect that.
Yeah.
Because I can love her and have a relationship with her despite what happened. I don't need anything from her. I don't need her to say sorry. I don't need her to admit anything or not admit anything. I mean, why? Well, I don't need it. Yeah. Again, that's what forgiving is about for me. It's not just sweeping it under the carpet. God, no. But I deal with my stuff. I don't need to deal with hers as well.
I mean, there's the physical aspect. Without going into too much detail, I mean, wouldn't the signs of sexual abuse, I mean, I'm not an expert, but like when you're beating your kids and things like that, I mean...
firstly, let's think about sex. I mean, let's just sort of, without sort of being all shy and embarrassed about it,
does it not cause early puberty in girls and things that would it not?
No, of course not. No. There's only, there's the only way you would know is because you can see the hymen. But by the time a girl is 6-7 years old, you're not looking at her hymen anymore because you don't need to clean her to that extent. But there's sexual abuse is not about putting your penis into a child, at all. It's about there's a lot more to sex than that.
Yeah.
And
Okay. I mean, I don't know. Like that's what I would like to think you would know. Like you would know the signs to see in a young kid that was abused that maybe would not be emotionally able to tell you. There would be physical signs. I don't know.
Well, today, possibly more so. Firstly. Secondly, in the rough, like when they sort of get violent and it's anal sex and, bursting and hurting and that kind of stuff involved, yes, sure. But in my case, that was not the case.
Okay.
It was, as I said, it was like a loving thing that then, and I mean, it's difficult even to use that word love in the sentence because how do you put love and abuse in the same sentence? But it was abuse, but it was done in a way that could be perceived as being loving.
Okay.
So he, for example, taught me from when I was about 3.5 to masturbate, right?
Okay.
If you think back to when you were a small child and you started masturbating, was there any physical on your body? Would someone have been able to look at you and go, oh my goodness, you started masturbating?
I don't know.
How it is. You're a father of you're a father of a young girl. Tell me your child does not come over to you and fling herself, her arms around you, and she's got herself busy and her neck is there. And, and you kind of go, oh my God, get those hands off me. It's normal. It's normal. It's what kids do.
Yeah, no, I know not. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, Lucy, you have to
You can't get your head around that, can you?
I know we're going over time a little, Lucy. I hope that's not a problem. It's getting be hard to suddenly stop now.
You'll never be able to look at it in the same light.
I have to drink some water now.
It is. It's a fact. It's the same with when it comes to politics. You can ask the same thing.
Of course, that I know that. But didn't your sister experience it differently though?
Very differently. Now, let me tell you the reason for that. Now, that's one of my regrets about the film, is that I do not go into enough explanation about this. I do say it, but it's so briefly said, and so that it doesn't come across. Okay. So my parents, my biological mother and father, divorced when I was a baby. My sister's older than me. My sister went and lived with my father. So when my sister was 13 and I was 9, she came to live with us from my father. But she was living in England and we were in Namibia. 1970s and the early 80s, you didn't just hop on a jet plane and whiz over. It wasn't the way it worked, okay? Also, financially, there were many reasons. It didn't happen, okay? So she came to live with us when she was 13. Now, when a sexual predator starts having sex with you when you're 13 for the first time, it's a very different experience to when you're 2, okay? A, you now know what this is. B, you're 13, your hormones are already going, and I'm not suggesting that she was open to it, because she wasn't. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying your perspective of your body has already changed at 13. Your the relationship is different. This is not your dad. This is your stepfather, who you're meeting when you're 13. Okay, not a good thing. So consider all of that, number one. Number two, when she arrived, I was 9. By then I'd been having sexual abuse on me for 7 years, right? She doesn't arrive and I go, hey, guess what we do on Friday nights? No, that's not how it works, okay? So we didn't discuss it. Also, we had our own relationship issues. I was 9, she was 13. That's just the most normal thing, right? So her experience of Dragan and her relationship and the way in which he approached that grooming with her was 100% different to my experience on every level, okay? For her, it was violent, it was vile, it was a stranger, it was at a time when she was already starting to sort of be self-exploratory naturally because of natural causes. She was trying to establish a relationship with her mother, and he was trying to wedge himself between her and her mother, okay, because he had to groom her very fast, because he had this perfectly groomed household that this foreigner was now coming to invade, okay. He had to protect his grooming of me that he'd invested 7 years in already, right? And to protect himself, possibly, I don't know, but I would imagine, he had to protect himself from being uncovered, or that he would have to stop what he was doing to me, So I didn't explain that in the film, which really should have been explained. And I think And the reason why I regret it is, as an emotion of regret, is because part of what I was hoping to achieve was to show the difference between childhood, early childhood grooming and abuse versus teenage rape.
Yeah.
And the impact on your life.
Yeah. Well, that's what I figured that was why you did it, but an awful lot of people didn't figure that. But
no.
But I could see that too. It wasn't just that. There was lots of, you were trying to do that throughout the whole movie. I think the documentary. That it's like you said, it's a different kind of documentary than other kinds of documentaries that touch on paedophilia, where it's just all crying and horror, and it's not always like that. But did your mother not notice the abuse that your sister got then? I mean,
okay, so the reason that made it all just so perfect for Dragan, I mean, for him it was just it couldn't have been more perfect, is that one of the reasons my sister was coming to live with us from my father is that she was being badly treated, not sexually abused, but she was being beaten and emotionally abused by my father's wife. She arrived with a letter from my biological father to my mother, telling my mother that she was a bad child. Okay. So when my sister immediately started playing out and acting out because of what Dragan was doing, there was interpretation that she was playing out because of the experience that she just arrived from. And that she was rejecting my mother, and she was being bad towards my mother and looking for mum's attention by doing outrageous things because of her own early childhood experience. But of course that wasn't the case. I mean, it was to a certain extent, but that wasn't the case, And then when it came out, my mother was so shocked. I mean, you must remember it was my sister who brought it out when she was 15. So she experienced it for about 18 months, 2 years. And then she told someone, and then through her telling, it came out. But my mother's first reaction, again, I mean, everyone goes, terrible of the mother, but it's a time context. It's an era context, where we were and when we were. And my mum, her whole 18 months with my sister had been difficult. The reason and the perspective and why and all of that was different from each one, depending on which glasses you were looking through. But it was different. So when this happened and when this came out, my mother, her first reaction and interpretation was not what a terrible man he is. It was, I'm talking the immediate reaction. I'm not talking like even within hours it changed, because then all the truth really came out and he admitted it and all of that. And then it was, like what? But her immediate reaction was, like my sister coming in at 13 created it in order to hurt my mother, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yes.
It wasn't the case, and that fortunately was cleared up, but that instance had lasting damage on my sister.
Okay.
Obviously that's what my sister carries. I remember it a little bit more holistically because it was just such a weird, and my experience of it was different. Where I was coming from was different. Everything about it was different. And my age was different. So my perspective of knowledge of experience was different,
So how's your relationship with your sister now?
Oh, it's awesome. Now she's not my best friend. My husband's my best friend, but she's my second best friend.
That's great. That's good.
And that's brand new. That's 2 years old,
Okay. And how does she feel about the documentary and the reaction to it?
The reaction or my reaction?
Now, how does she feel about the documentary and the reaction towards your relationship with your sister? I mean, people have been comparing both of your reactions. I mean, what does she think about all this?
Well, her perspective is her love for me. So she did it for me. Okay. In the first place, that was the reason why she agreed to do it, is and until I moved here and until we really got to know each other, and she also really got to know me, I don't think she realized how okay and over it I am, like truly, because remember, her perspective is different. Okay. And it wasn't until she saw the film that she was able to understand that. And then I moved here, and then we became good friends. Secondly, our friendship and our relationship today is based on today, because I don't live there. That's my past. It's my childhood. It's sure it's impacted on who I am today, and it's certainly impacted on who she is and her, how she is. But if anything, it's something that we are connected in, because we now are able to look at each other as sisters and say, you are reacting like this to that because of that. And then when she's able to see it, or I'm able to see it because the one said it, you see it and you realize it and you go, oh, that's interesting, and you move on. So therefore, because we have the shared experience, we understand each other on a different level to how most people understand us.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
So yeah, I think it brings us closer as friends.
Yeah, in a strange kind of way.
Yeah.
There was a very good comment, which you answered very well. In the comment section is brilliant to read.
I'm actually busy studying psychology at the moment, and I plan on doing a thesis on the comment section. I really do. I plan on using it as a basis on a thesis, because I think it really is a really interesting slice of psychology.
It is true. I mean, yeah. I mean, it was a question. Would you say that grooming is like brainwashing?
Oh, 100%. It's 100%. The difference is, in fact, it is. I would say it's the same. I would almost want to call them synonyms. The difference, I think, is brainwashing usually is to get information, and it's very obviously involuntary. Whereas grooming is more about making you do something voluntarily that's not necessarily good. Whether you know it's good or not is not the point. But I would sort of go snap if I turned over those two cards.
Okay. And just from your experience of being groomed, I mean, what would you say to parents what they should look out for? I mean, we've heard some of it in the documentary, but like to protect their kids from sex predators, I mean, what are the key things that parents should look out for?
Is make sure, okay, children go through phases in their lives, right? So what you're looking for is different at different phases. Okay. So I can only really talk from my own experience about from birth to your teens. I can then talk from your teens onwards from my sister's experience. All I can say to you is that until a child is between, and I've got an 18-year-old and I've got a 10-year-old, those are my two kids. So I really do have a spectrum of them, in the context of I've had both sides, which is wonderful. Your child needs you, boy or girl, as their parent, to be their number one, right? They need you to be their number one until they are 10 to 12 years old. If you are not their number one, even if it's your husband or your wife, question it. Don't accuse, but question it, observe it, watch it. Again, let me remind you of that statistic, right? This is not next door neighbors. This is happening in our own homes. This is happening. You have to assume that it's happening in your home. So what I've done with my kids is all I can say, because obviously that's been my modus operandi, is talk to them from the moment they understand what you're talking about people wanting to be close, and about people pretending to be other people, and online people pretending to be your friend, or anybody who wants to be your friend, even if they sound like a kid. Okay? Because let me tell you, a lot of pedophiles do sound like kids online, right? There's no reason under the sun for anybody to be closer to your kid than you before they're the age of 12. Pedophilia is not a male thing. It is male and female. Yes, it's more predominant in men, but it's not exclusive to men by any means. It's also not a girl thing. Okay, boys are just less likely to talk about it ever, whereas girls tend to come out with it at some point in their life, right? Maybe not at the time, but later. Men just most often don't. Why? Because of that thing of they're stronger. Okay, just by the way. So allow your boys and girls to talk, and talk to them openly. Normalize the talk about sex and sexual conversation. Don't make sex secretive and giggly, and make it private. Sex is something that happens between two people privately, but it's not a secret. And let me tell you why. Because when your child, that girl or that boy, is a teenager, you also want to know when they start becoming voluntarily sexually active. That's not unhealthy as a parent. Why? So that you can protect them from STDs and stuff. To turn around and go, oh, I don't want them to, and oh, they never will. It's just rubbish. Okay? It's rubbish. I'm sorry. But they're getting sexually active, and they're getting sexually active voluntarily from very young, right? At least 3 years before you think it's happening. So you may as well get those conversations going so that it's not an awkward thing in your house. Okay, so that it's normal. Why? Because it is normal. It is normal for people in loving relationships to have sex. Okay, it is normal for mummy and daddy, or mummy and mummy, or mummy and daddy, whatever the scenario is in your home. It is normal for you to have sex. It's not normal. I'm not saying you must sit at the dinner table and go, oh, guess what? Daddy and I had sex this morning. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, mummy and dad, they're learning about it at school. It's not a secret. It's not like it was when we were growing up. Okay. So what is sex? Sex is not the penis going into the vagina. Sex starts long before that, right? Sex starts with the flirting and the pre and everything else. And the reason why it's important for them to recognize that is because it's just a good skill to have in life. Let's be honest. Okay. Is a healthy relationship with sex. Number one. Number two, if they are being flirted with by anybody, they will be able to pick that up. So it won't suddenly take them by surprise when they're talking about sex normal. Don't make it something that's shameful, or no, don't do that. Thank you. Because they need to also respect the privacy around sex for you as a couple in the house.
Yeah.
Right. So what we need to do is just break down that whole barrier and just get over ourselves. Okay. Yeah. Quite frankly, because the best protection you can give to your kid against sexual predators is by making them aware of this dynamic on this planet called sex, which has nothing to do with procreation. Okay? Because, and I'm not saying sexualize them, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying don't be naive.
Yeah,
because you were as a kid, your kids are also.
Yeah, well, the knowing the signs is very important, I think, especially would you say, like apps and on the internet, when Facebook, when they're getting chat requests and all that, friend requests, and everything like
And
that.
you can't stop them from having that life, because that is their reality. That's not the world we grew up in, but that is the world they're growing up in. And unfortunately, it's much more beneficial as a parent to teach your children how to live in that world safely.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that as a parent, you're guiding that relationship. If any person tries to be closer to your child than you are, that's a warning sign, right? When they start talking about, that really close relationship that they have with Auntie Betty or Uncle Roy, okay, just question it. I'm not saying be accusing and become like, oh, helicopter. I'm not saying that. Just take a double look.
Yeah.
And just have conversations with them about their relationships with people. And I'm not saying, oh, does he touch you inappropriately? Because let me tell you, by the time they're touching you inappropriately, they're way down that line of grooming. Okay. You're talking about the relationship. What is it like? What do you laugh about? What do you talk about? You like playing chess. Oh, you play chess. Okay, well, what's chess about? Is it about, because again, one of Dragan's modus operandis with me was chess, which is why I use it as an example.
Okay.
But it becomes about strategy and, talk to them. Just talk to them. Make that relationship.
Well, I think the education is a lot of it is for the parents as well.
Don't rely on the schools to teach your children about how to be protected.
Yeah,
we have to get over ourselves.
Yeah,
first.
I think parents need to step up as well. So I'm on the last part really. I just would like to touch on the comments. So you will get the surefire angry comments. Like I'm going to read a few. So like a surefire cure for pedophilia is a bullet behind the ear. This kind of thing. They all must die, and this documentary is trying to normalize pedophilia and their sickness because they should be hung and killed. End of story. I mean, you get this a lot. I mean, how do you react to these kind of comments?
Well, my sick warped sense of humor side of me goes, well, again, going back to that statistic, there's one way of dealing with climate change and overpopulation. Because if you had to honestly say every person born that's got pedophilic tendencies is born with a tattoo on their forehead, you'd be very shocked. It would be a third race right there, or gender, or whatever you want to say. That's the first thing. Shocking. The second thing is it's not curable. But people need, because it is as prolific as it is, when we really get down to it, people need to learn, who have it, need to learn to live with it. Because it's not condonable to behave and to react on it. Okay? Because in the same way that being psychopathic or murderous, okay, is an illness, so is this. Does it mean that we should put them all in an institution and whatever? Well, in the old days, probably, but now I like to believe that we're a slightly more intelligent human race and that we have people who, I think we should just start being a little bit more mature about it. And I think we need to start being a little bit more open to the conversation on how to stop it from happening in the first place. I think we need to put a little bit of the money that is in the world in dealing with survivors and victims, if we can start putting into the prevention of, would be really nice. And if people could stop being ostrich about it, and by saying it's easy to say put a bullet in the head, that's not dealing with it.
Yeah.
That's just.
It's anybody can say that.
Counterproductive.
Well,
let's be intelligent about it. Let's find a real solution.
One of the problems with that kind of thinking is that the people that do want to seek help, that are pedophiles, will just go under and you'll never hear from them again. I mean, so you won't learn anything from their behavior.
Correct.
Yeah. but there was a lot of that. But that's
It doesn't mean that I'm trying to normalize it.
No.
It does not mean that I'm trying to make it okay, because it's not okay. It's not okay. But you don't want people hiding. You don't want people in the shadows. You really don't. You would rather know where they are so you can deal with it.
Yeah,
you know?
and your argument, as you said before, it's widespread now. So well, as it always been. So I just wrote something that I think for a lot of people that they can't get your honesty. I mean, and that this is your story, it's your pain, it's your journey, and they don't know that this is part of your healing process, and it's not particularly for them, I mean, that's what I took, that this is a story that you made for yourself as much as you did for the audience. They're like, it's part of your healing process. Is that correct?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And the reason I say I got that, thanks, love. I don't think it's part of my healing process. And the reason why I say that is because I honestly believe that I had done my healing before I even started.
Okay.
I don't think I would have been able to do it if I hadn't done my healing. It doesn't mean that I don't still feel pain about it from time to time, but I have learned enough through my process to be able to contextualize that pain and to put it where it, package it as it deserves to be.
So would you say that's the capping stone on it then? That was part of just closing the book on it then?
No, I think that that moving forward, my part is about giving back and, sharing, not in the context of telling my story, because it's not about it's not about me, it's not about my story, but putting energy into manifesting the help where it's needed.
Okay.
And helping where I can help. Now, not everybody has and I've learned this the hard way because I've learned it through judgment, okay, is that people think I'm weird because I'm not freaked out and creeped out and screamed out and emotionally connected or affected by these people who do crazy things, okay? Does that make me sick? Maybe. I don't know. I've seen enough psychologists and psychiatrists in my life. I think I would have been diagnosed as sick by now if I was, but maybe I am. And if so, then that's okay. We'll deal with it. But it's more about, I think that in the same way, if you're an artist and you have the ability to paint incredibly, I think it's your responsibility to paint. Okay? Because it's a gift that you give me in society through your art and through your painting, right? You give me the beauty and the possibility and the option of appreciating that level of art.
Yeah.
In the same way, I think that if you are the kind of person who is desensitized through your own experience and through your own learnings in life, to be able to deal with and hear stories of absolute horror and terrible things without it going on board and without it affecting you in a way that makes you not be able to sleep at night. I think it's your responsibility to dedicate time to hearing those people who have those experiences in there and what they're holding themselves back from doing, because those are the people who are needed in the forward movement of trying to find a solution rather than working on the effect, or the result of. Now, if I had the ability to listen to psychopaths talking about how they dream of doing terrible things to people and was able to help them not do that, I would feel responsible and a sense of responsibility to do something like that at some point in my life to give back to society. Well, this is something that I'm able to do, and therefore that's why I do it. That's why I talk about it. That's why I sat there in the desert and allowed this man to talk all this absolute bullshit and trollop to my face.
Yeah.
it doesn't, because I am able to wash it off.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I did see people say, "Why Why is she so calm?" um, the two things I liked about it is that I mean, you paint the dragon in a certain light to show that. I mean, this is what people were saying, like the human side of a paedophile. But I think that was important to see, because it just shows you that a paedophile can be your father, it can be your brother, it can be your mother, it can be your next door neighbor that you get on well. It's not meant to be a monster that you immediately hate. And so, it was important to show the human side to Dragan and let him explain in his own words, as misguided and unrealistic.
I suppose go so far as to say that every person knows a pedophile closely. That they are.
Yeah, so we're going to be all looking at our friends then in a new light, are we? But the point, it just shows a monster. He's not a monster. He's a man. He's a father. He's a brother. He's a sister. He's a mother. That's the important thing.
Who does monstrous things?
Yeah. Someone who can easily manipulate us. So I think that's what you were trying to get from the documentary, and and I think that the anger that you received from the comment section is kind of good, because it brought that anger and maybe directed it to the reality, even if it maybe was hard to take for yourself on a personal level, maybe.
No, I go through phases. It's a bit like in fact, it's so funny you were asking about my relationship with my sister. That is one of the things. My sister sometimes bans me from the comments pages. And then because the reason why I read them, there's only one reason that I read the comments, really. And that is because I know the amount of people that have watched the film and then have contacted me, some of them via the comments page, and then when I've responded, then they've emailed me. And I can feel them sitting on the other side of the computer, because it's the first time that they're telling anybody about their experience. So yes, there's a lot of verbal vomit, that comes in my direction. But out of every 100 verbal vomits, there are a couple of people who I know it's changed their lives in the context of giving them the permission to talk about things that were hard for them to accept, because their experience was not what society thinks that it should have been, and they can't reconcile that. And those are the people I make it for.
Yeah, well, I thought it was clever filmmaking, because this is what I think, that you were trying to create that anger, just so that that the viewer is meant to be angry. That's the whole point. He's meant to see that it's not a monster; it's a real person. So they should be angry. So they might not be sure why they're angry, but they should at least get to see that this is what happens. It's not someone hiding in the bushes waiting for school children. It's
in fact, the other extreme. It's always going to be person that's closest.
Yeah. So a lot of people were angry, and perhaps they don't know that they can't process why. Maybe. What else have I? I'm on my last page, so this was a comment, and it was a typical of a lot of comments. They didn't like the tone. They would much prefer you to see you break down a cry, a sob story with all the gory details. And that's what I liked about the documentary, apart from the penis. If your father with the excuse, which the mother said, touch him on the penis, which I got immediately, but I'm surprised that most people just said, oh, well, that must have happened because Dragan said so. I mean,
In fact, that was why I wrote it in the in the description, is that that experience did happen. It did happen. But it happened so differently.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, let me give you a perfect example, right? Okay, so what do you see? You know, what do you see? Has it got a handle? You know, your perspective right now is that you see a cylinder with black and white stripes on it. But the minute I do this and change the perspective that you're seeing it from, suddenly you see something different. Okay, so what you see is a cylinder with stripes on. What I see is a handle. I see a cup.
Yeah.
I can't see a cup. Okay, and that's exactly what it is. It's perspective, and it's the angle that you're looking at it from.
Yeah. Well, I was just surprised that everybody, a lot of people just took it for granted that what Dragan said was true in his mind. That it wasn't just anything innocent or even, and even if I don't think your mother did say that, but even if she did say it, she would have said it.
The context was different.
Different way, yes.
The context was different, and her intention behind the context was 100% different.
Yeah, but anybody that has kids would have immediately clicked that, I think.
You think?
Well, I hope so.
Show me a child who doesn't come across a penis and go, "Oh, what's that?" Yes. I mean, it's like we need to just grow up.
Yeah. So, one comment I picked out, someone said, "I think the tone of this is worrying. Personally, it doesn't portray the pure evil of his crimes." And what I would have said, like, they want a warts and all picture of the crimes, and they actually want and demand to see you in tears and utter grief. So everything has to be in black and white for them. You know, they don't understand that it's not.
I think
all
that
perfectly.
The fact that he can be so nonchalant and the fact that he can be so matter of fact shows the pure evil.
Yeah.
You know, yes. Oh, wouldn't it be so encouraging if we're just walking around with the third horn over here? That's great. You know, life would be so much simpler.
And I don't understand why do people need all the gory details. I mean, you said you were sexually
because the reason that because some people go in to watch a thing that's titled about pedophilia documentary, they go in to watch it about with an open mind. Some people go to watch it because they think that there's going to be something really disgusting, as if they don't realize that YouTube wouldn't allow that. Some people go in to watch it because they might get to see someone else's pain. And it's very disappointing for them when they come to the end of the film and they haven't seen the pain that they wanted to see.
Yeah.
Enough of it anyway. My sister shows pain, but they haven't seen enough of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. I think it's people voicing their disapproval of, you know, the same reason why do we turn to look at a car accident? Because there's something innate in human beings that you want. It has to be awful and hideous, otherwise it's not real.
Yeah, I mean, they also don't, perhaps, like, they don't want to see a strong woman as well, you know. I mean, someone who...
Now, this is going to sound like a bad thing to say, and I don't mean it, but people who haven't finished their healing journey, okay, and people who haven't even started their healing journey do not want to devalue their own brokenness or space of distraughtness, or where they have not yet come to the fact of realizing that they have a choice, okay, of putting it behind them, because they need that. It's a secondary gain for them because they're going to get something out of that reaction, and, you know. So I think there's a combination of all sorts in that, and the motives for people's anger is various, you know. I mean, I've even had one of my friends from when I was a child saying, but why did he not abuse me? I was around your place all the time. Well, my first sort of sick answer is, what, are you jealous? You know? You know?
Yeah.
But I could also give you the truth, and that is because you came from a very, you came from a very solid family with beautiful parents who were both extremely present, and you were the worst possible person. There's no ways that someone who's a predator would target someone like you, because you're too protected. You're going to tell.
Well, YouTube it's not a two-way process. You're bearing your soul, but you don't know what the people typing are coming from. And I have seen the comments. It is true. Once you reply to them, it's nearly a different person that's you're talking to when they reply and say, well, actually, I didn't mean to say this, and I'm sorry. And then it's just it's very flippant, the replies in YouTube.
I think sometimes people don't expect me to respond.
Yes. Well, that was going to be one of my nearly near the end questions. You do reply to a lot of comments, the good and the bad, and I think that's it's very appreciative of you. It's not all negative. I mean, a lot of people have, you're reaching out to other people who are abused, and you're helping them with good advice and comfort. Listen to the stories. So that is a very positive thing to come out of the movie, the documentary.
I grew up in a time when we didn't talk about it, and therefore I felt very alone in my experience, not of while it was happening necessarily, but when I was trying to deal with what had happened. And if I had had somebody to say to me some of the things that I've learned, that I've had to learn the hard way, if I could have had an hour with those three girls, there is so much that I would have wanted to say to them. And I wouldn't just want to say to them, I would want to give it to them written in a piece of paper or recorded so that they can listen to it later when they're older and every time they have those experiences. If I had had the possibility of knowing that there were other people out there who had experienced the same as me, who could have explained things to me or given me a perspective or understood or validated or, the difficult things to accept, like the fact that it wasn't always a bad feeling, it wasn't, that's hard. That's a hard thing to accept, that's shameful. What a terrible shame. I mean, how can you say something like that, Or don't say that out loud, because you can't say that out loud, If I'd had somebody who had the balls to say that out loud so that it made me realize that it didn't make me an evil monster. Okay, it might have helped me, and I might have finished my journey a whole lot faster. And that's why it's important. I didn't want to come out there and go bleh and, splurt my story and put it out there and then just walk away. I wanted to start conversation, and that's a two-way thing. And I have to have the balls to stand up and have that conversation,
Yeah, well, it has started a conversation, at least on that comment section, anyway. And I think it's not really about Dragan anyway.
No,
when you think about it, the documentary. Okay,
it's fortuitous that he has the name.
Yes. Okay, Lucy, just before we go, I mean, what are you up to these days? I mean, are you still in the documentary world? Are you still writing? Have you any projects lined up despite COVID?
Well, I work for an amazing, awesome little production company in Nottingham called Skeleton. And we make corporate films, corporate videos, and content and video content. And it's still communicating through film. I spent so long in commercial world, and then I just love telling stories, and I love the medium of film to tell those stories. And sometimes it's live action, sometimes it's animation. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as I can keep telling stories. Would I like to make documentaries? Yes, I would like to make documentaries. Of course I would. But I didn't make this film because I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker. I made this film because I needed a different perspective to be put out there for people to just consider a different perspective. So now I'm going to continue being my mum to my 18-year-old and my 10-year-old, and continue to now have the tables turned while I start taking care of my mum. I'm going to continue developing and growing the relationship with my sister, who is now 50, or at least she will be next week. And I'm just going to live my life. And I'm studying to do counseling. I'm studying to be a therapist myself, so that I can speak with authority. And I just leave myself open to whatever's coming, because I don't know what's coming.
Yeah, I don't think most people know what's coming with this COVID. If I was on your website, it was very informative, and it's great to read some of the things you wrote down on your website as a follow-up to your documentary. It's www. So if you'd help me, I tried my best. I couldn't find it.
I don't have a website, and that's why I'm listening to you going, did you indeed?
There was something.
No,
there was something I read, and you had loads of replies. Yeah. What was that?
I have a Facebook page, Dragan's Lair.
I read it.
Hasn't been very successful, but that's because I haven't really put a lot of attention into.
But there was a website, and it was
no.
I seen a website. There was your replies about your sister. There was replies about the follow-up. There was replies.
I have a blog.
It could be that. Yeah, maybe it was that.
Dragan's Lair, and I have okay. I have Dragan's Lair on Facebook, okay.
So it was obviously your blog then. Yeah.
It could be my blog. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But I'll leave a link to it anyway. It touches on some of the questions that we brought up today. And your YouTube channel is Lucy Witts.
Yep.
You posted some outtakes from the.
Well, I'm looking at the hard drive. It's right here, actually. Funnily enough.
Okay.
Because what I'm now starting to do is I'm starting to realize I've got 8 hours of footage.
Yeah.
Now, just for the record, you can't monetize this kind of content because it's deemed as sensitive content. So it's not about money. It's about having the opportunity of learning. So what I'm now going to be starting to do, just sort of on a slow, when I feel like it basis, is just sending some of the pieces of the interviews with Marcel Lant, with Dragan, with my mum, with my sister, that haven't necessarily made it into the film, or sort of trying to clear up some areas which people ask me about in the comments and want to know, because a lot of that information I have actually got, but in the film. Okay. So that's what it is. It's more about I'd like to ultimately, when I'm start working as a counselor, I'd like to get into family rehabilitation. Ultimately, that's what I'd like to do, because I feel, sentences are never, because Dragan's got a long sentence, but very rarely are sentences long if you actually get a sentence.
Yeah.
And I think that just discourages people from doing anything about it legally, because I think that's the only thing that you can do. You can't go out and kill a murderer. It's two wrongs don't make a right. What you do is you give them to the law, and you allow the law to take its course. And it takes a very long time, and you have to allow it to happen. But at the end of the day, you still have to live with yourself, and on the other side of the fence, you still have your dad or your mum or your uncle or your cousin or your tennis coach or whoever it was. Yeah. That still lives in society. So everyone needs to learn to live with each other. The impacts on the family are horrific, across the board and for multiple reasons. So I'd like to get into that work. I'd also like to get into the work of working with pedophiles in the context of, possibly with teenagers or young men and women who have urges and don't know what to do about them. But I'm not qualified to do that just yet. But I'd like to be helping in a positive and constructive way. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Not more to say, but thank you very much, sincerely, for giving me your time, answering all my questions, sharing your
Thanks for getting in touch.
Sharing your inspirational message of hope and the power of forgiveness. So thanks, Lucy, and have a nice weekend.
And you too.